Alright, give me the game.
If you want it, then you'll have to take it. But you already knew that.
Look, I can't be fucked with this shit. Just give me the game so I can talk about it.
Ugh, fine. But this time I get to be in your review and actually help you review it. And this time, you can't shoot me.
Yeah, whatever. No problem. Devil May Cry 5 is my favourite game in the series by a long mile. Has the best story, best combat, best bonus content. It's an all-round incredible package that I cannot praise enough. The long-awaited entry that took 11 years to come out and brought the series back from the brink of destruction after the sales of DMC Devil May Cry. We return to the original canon with our favourite long jacket wearing demon quip slaying son of a bitch, Nero. I'm kidding, of course it's Dante. Our lad is back to kick some demonic ass with the help of Nero and newcomer to the series V. These are our three protagonists, but other fan favourites make their appearance to help our boys out, like Trish and Lady, along with another newcomer, Nico. She fits in really well in the cast despite only being introduced here. Nico is the daughter of Agnes from DMC4 and has an awesome brother-sister dynamic with Nero which is endlessly fun to watch. She's also got the hots for Lady, which in fairness, who wouldn't? There's a really funny ongoing gag with her that you can stop at payphones as Nero or V throughout the game and call Nico to arrive to get upgrades or items from her. But the cutscenes for these are always hilarious as she just appears in the weirdest way to wherever you are. These were always a highlight whenever they showed up. She's also the only one who reacts to Dante's shenanigans when the two meet and fangirls like crazy over him, which, once again, who wouldn't? This game uses every single mechanic that we've seen over the past centuries while adding in a bunch of new ones to keep the gameplay fresh. Style switching, delayed combos, Nero having a specialised arm, using red orbs to buy new moves, it's all here and turned up to the maximum to give us the deepest combat system we've ever had.
It certainly is, and you'll need some help to tackle it.
Oh, for fuck's sake, Imperial Academy, I shot you in my DMC3 review. What the fuck are you doing here?
I was literally in the intro for this video.
Oh yeah.
This game has the most interesting combat to talk about, but I'll have to tackle it character by character since there's a lot to get through. So, let's start with Nero. Nero is still an incredibly flawed character here. He has an underlying insecurity about his abilities which leads him to take huge risks or get himself into situations he can't handle. He's still quick to anger as well, which also impacts his decision making, since he won't strategize but react on raw emotion alone. He plays mostly the same here as what he did in DMC4, with many of the same combos being unlockable, and he still has access to his Exceed mechanic that I forgot to mention in my review of 4. Exceed is an ability of Nero's sword that allows him to rev it to make his attacks more powerful. You can either rev it before a fight, or you can time the button press right after an attack to power up your next move mid-combo. Nero is missing two things this time around. His version of DT, due to story reasons, and Devilbringer is gone. However, in its place, we have multiple Devil Breakers. These are robotic arms that we can buy from Nico or pick up in the levels.
Nero's Devil Breakers offer a wide range of abilities that are a breath of fresh air from the Devilbringer. These abilities being Overture, allows Nero to emit a powerful blast of energy or electricity which stuns and knocks back any enemies within his immediate vicinity.
Rawhide allows Nero to whip enemies before taking them to his kinky sex dungeon.
Gerbera increases the movement of Nero, allowing him to jump through the air with powerful shockwaves that can also damage enemies. Gerbera can also unleash a powerful beam which can obliterate crowds of enemies in mere seconds.
Punchline is an arm that detaches and can hit enemies while you continue your combo. You can also ride it.
Helter Skelter is used to drill into enemies and break their guard, allowing Nero to do massive damage.
Buster Arm acts like Devilbringer from DMC4.
Tomboy boosts both Red Queen and Blue Rose, depending on which one you use, to again deal massive damage.
And Ragtime slows down time like Quicksilver, but only in a concentrated area. This wide variety of abilities means that you can customize Nero to suit your playstyle, or you can be constantly changing out arms since they have durability and can break, either by the player's own control or by using them enough times. But no matter what breaker you are using, you can always use the Snatch ability, which is still incredibly fun to use. I didn't use them a ton on my first playthrough, but throughout the playthrough for this video, I used them a lot more. At the end of the game, Nero regains his Devil Trigger form, and can use it on subsequent playthroughs to gain the usual bonuses of increased attack damage and getting your health back, and you can use the Buster moves. Fuck yeah! Let's move on to our newcomer next and talk about V. He is a mysterious lad who is very soft-spoken and seems to know a lot about the demonic things happening around us. He has 3 familiars that he can summon at any time, and is a massive fan of poetry, using a book he keeps with him to recharge his Devil Trigger.
These familiars offer a very strange and unusual change of pace from the Devil May Cry formula that we are used to, utilising a more ranged focused kit, which many fans, including Ross, don't seem to take much of a liking to. Personally, I think he's absolutely fine. These familiars consist of Griffin, Shadow, and Nightmare, which can be summoned at the press of a button. Griffin is a demon bird with a heavy emphasis on ranged attacks, firing projectiles and abilities with a large area of effect that can take care of large groups of enemies. Shadow is a demon panther that focuses on melee and close quarters combat that deals heavy damage while keeping the enemies away from V. Nightmare is the powerful heavy hitter that arrives when V activates his quote-unquote Devil Trigger, dealing a colossal amount of damage, and is usually the be-all and end-all if utilised appropriately. Griffin, Shadow, and Nightmare are all reflections of their DMC1 counterparts, but we'll get into that later.
I find V's combat to be the least engaging, since he does not engage in combat directly, but rather has others fight for him. I always end up just hitting buttons and things just kinda happen and I get S ranks in combat, despite not having a fucking clue what's happening. I mean, I hit my first triple S with him while playing like this. I keep doing some moves accidentally, like Griffin's AoE attack, because I was trying to move out of the way of an enemy. I know V's existence is important for the story, but every time I'm playing as him, I'd rather be playing as Nero or Dante. Speaking of the man himself, it's finally time to talk about Dante.
How's that for a rap?
We finally come to the big man himself. Cocky, sure of himself, badass, but a lovable goofball who makes fun of the most powerful demons in the underworld. This is a great return to form after people were disappointed by DMC's version of the Devil Hunter. Dante is easily at his most complex here, as we now have every skill he's learned through DMC 1 to 4. This includes all of his combos, particular moves like Stinger, changing styles on the fly, and gaining alternate weapons. And if you thought DMC 4 Dante could do crazy shit, then take a look at this.
Dante is quite literally built different, and as someone that has no lifetime, Dante's arsenal is absurdly diverse in how it lets you play him, because believe it or not, no two Dante mains really play the same.
Dante keeps his ability from 4 to switch style whenever he wants. His styles are different forms in combat that enhance different parts of Dante's normal moveset. I covered these in my 3 review, but I will go over them again so that we're all on the same page.
Is by far my favourite style, and the one I find the most useful. Trickster is the movement based style and affords Dante a more effective dodge, as well as being able to teleport once it has been leveled up. This is great at getting you out of a pinch, or as a way to close the distance to keep a combo going. I use it all the time for these exact reasons.
Join us
gives all of Dante's weapons an expanded moveset, giving you more ways to do damage and look stylish while doing so. This was my second most used style in the game, due to the fact that once leveled up and with Devil Sword Dante equipped, it can spawn extra swords that do damage on top of regular attacks. Boosts the variety of Dante's ranged combat, but I mainly used it due to its leveled up ability called Rainstorm, which is activated when jumping in the air and pressing the style button, and has Dante spinning around shooting his guns in a circle, which does damage to enemies around you. It can also be stacked. This was really helpful for airborne enemies when melee just won't cut it. Is the final style, and by far the most difficult to master. If the button is held down, Dante will block any incoming attacks and it will charge his Royal Gauge, but it will deplete your Devil Trigger. However, if the button press is timed perfectly, the gauge will fill up a lot faster and no DT will be lost. Once the gauge has been built up, Dante can do what's called a Royal Release. This is the power built up from the gauge being used in one big attack, which is super fun to do, especially when it's fully charged.
As for his weapons, we have the Rebellion and the Sparda. These two function quite similarly to each other in that their attack patterns are similar, with both swords doing a moderate amount of damage, but they play a more important role within the story later on.
These two allow Dante to use moves like Stinger and Million Stabs, as well as the combos we've seen from previous games. They're not as effective as his final main sword, but they get the job done. Dante is of course equipped with his trusty handguns, Ebony and Ivory, and I still use them a ton as they have so much versatility. He also has the shotgun, which I never used, due to the aforementioned versatility and the other better weapons.
Devil Sword Dante, the ultimate weapon forged from the combination of the now broken Rebellion and the retrieved Sparda. The Dante has the same attack pattern as its predecessors, but with the added special being that it can summon spectral sword swings that deal damage to enemies while in Swordmaster. This allows him to keep enemies at a distance and knock them back if they get too close.
Dante's other weapon he has from the start is Balrog. This is this game's version of the fist weapon. It has two modes that the player can swap between, blow and kick, both of which look cool as hell and do a decent amount of damage. Deal enough hits with it and it will ignite, which multiplies the damage output by putting a hot spin on every move performed.
Following up from Balrog, we have Cavalier, the roaring, rashing destroyer of large enemy crowds. Obtained after fighting Cavalier Angelo, this is a motorbike that Dante can split into two pieces to deal colossal damage to groups of demons. This bike can also be ridden, whether that be by boosting directly ahead at great speeds or flipping several feet into the air to perform air combos. Cavalier is truly something else.
Dr. Faust is the weirdest weapon by far, and the one I used the least due to its nature. Dr. Faust is a cowboy hat that uses red orbs you gather to attack enemies. This will drain your current amount of red orbs, but if the enemy is killed while using it, the amount of orbs you will get from them will be a substantial amount more than if you use normal attacks. It's a high risk, high reward weapon, but one I will leave until I have enough orbs to practice with it. It does have the best weapon introduction in the whole series in my opinion.
I'll take that.
Kalina Ann and Double Kalina Ann, the infamous rocket of Dear Old Lady. This time with double the action. These weapons allow Dante to unleash powerful ranged attacks in the form of destructive beams, barrages of homing rockets, and powerful explosions that for some reason make this weapon extremely versatile. Not very fast though, so keep that in mind when using it.
King Cerberus is a more powered up variant of the Cerberus weapon from DMC3 and has all the same moves that the old version had, but now with two extra forms of attack. The King Cerberus is equipped with lightning and fire attacks along with the usual ice, which is activated either by holding down the attack button or by using the Swordmaster style. I really like the DMC3 callback with this weapon's introduction and this weapon in general. It's one of my favourites. Dante also has multiple resources at his disposal, the first one being the usual Devil Trigger. This acts the same as all previous games and offers the same benefits. Where things get interesting though is with Sin Devil Trigger. Sin Devil Trigger is used by draining your normal DT gauge into the SDT gauge, then holding down the DT button. Upon release, Dante will become his most powerful form. This form has its own set of moves and is affected by your style. You cannot change style once in this form, so choose wisely. You also cannot cancel out of it. Once you've entered this form, you're stuck there, bucko. All of this together is why Dante is the most complex character in the whole game. All of these weapons, along with his styles and multiple DT forms, means that to get good with Dante, you need to practice. A lot. I am nowhere near good with this character, but I still enjoy the wide variety of ways that I can use him in combat.
The characters all offer a great variety of combat approaches and ways to style on your enemies, but moving on from that and onto the story, it is broken down into 20 missions that lasted me on average about half an hour to 45 minutes each. I genuinely believe that this is the best story in the whole series. Wouldn't you agree?
It sure is, as it follows a more save the world kind of plot, if you will. It's grandiose and cinematic and really makes you feel like the driving force behind the whole adventure. And it has the many differing perspectives of each of the characters all clashing against each other.
The story here is told out of order in the game, but in order to keep things as simple as possible, we will discuss what happens in the linear order of events as it actually happened from the character's perspective, but with some exceptions for the sake of dramatic impact. From this point on, this video is going to be filled to the brim with spoilers, so if anything I say has piqued your interest, go get the game and play it yourself. This was the best experience I've ever had with a game story, and I want all of you to have the same fantastic time that I did. So with all of that out of the way, let's dive in.
We start with Nero at home working on his van with Nico. Kyrie calls him inside for dinner, but Nero stays behind to finish the van and sees a man at the garage door. Nero's arm begins to glow and the man, in one swift motion, throws him across the room and rips off his devil arm, turns it back into the Yamato and opens a portal. Nero passes out on the floor. A few weeks later, Morrison turns up at Devil May Cry to tell Dante he has a job for him. He introduces Dante to V and he tells Dante that a powerful demon is about to arise. Dante is intrigued by this and asks more about the demon. Cut again a few days later and a giant tree called the Clyphos shows up in Redgrave City. Dante, Trish and Lady, along with V, make their way up the tree in order to defeat the Demon King Urizen, with Nero tagging behind them as backup. The ladies go ahead of Dante and are defeated. Dante gives it a go as well, but is overwhelmed by Urizen's power. Nero turns up to face Urizen, but is decimated by him, but right before he is killed, Dante gets back up.
Round 2.
Dante bursts into his DT form and strikes Urizen again, but is defeated and his sword Rebellion is destroyed.
Don't forget that Urizen captures Lady and Trish, making great use of them as power sources for his two demon henchmen, which he later enlists throughout the adventure.
Nero and V flee the scene in order to regroup and find a better way to take down Urizen. The fate of Dante is unknown. Nero and V make their way through Redgrave City, destroying Clyphoth roots along the way. Nero is now using his Devil Breakers in place of his missing arm. While fighting through the city, he fights a demon called Artemis and upon defeating it finds Lady inside the demon. V hears two demons talking about the sword Sparda and how it is still around somewhere. Nero heads toward the tree to face Urizen while V goes to retrieve the sword. In finding the sword, V discovers that Dante is still alive and he nearly stabs him in the fucking head in order to wake him up. Could've just used a fucking alarm clock, man.
Dante then decides to make use of the Sparda, a fun callback to DMC1 and the first time we see him use it since Malay Island, and rest assured, nothing stands in his way, especially with his dear father's old sword.
Dante heads through the remains of the city to eventually reach his old family home. On the way, he fights one of the demons V heard earlier and discovers Trish inside of it. He leaves her in V's care as he continues through the city. Trish is curious as to what V is as he's starting to fall apart and he recalls the tale of his birth. The man who ripped Nero's R off was the decaying Vergil, and he uses the Yamato to separate his demon form from his human form. Urizen is the demon and V is the human. V is falling apart due to the lack of demonic power he has, and now the crew is on the clock to defeat Urizen before losing V.
It's never explained throughout the story where Vergil was, where he came from, or even how he got to Fortuna in the first place. But one thing's for sure, is that he is a man on a mission, and that is reuniting with the love of his life, the Yamato.
Dante gets to his home and knows what Vergil did with the Yamato and wonders what the rebellion would do to him. He stabs himself with it and he absorbs the rebellion and Sparda sword to create the Sin Devil Trigger form. During this, Nero has made his way back to Urizen and manages to land the first hit on him, but this is futile as he is about to be crushed. Dante flies in to save him and fights Urizen. Nobody wins, but now Urizen teleports to the bottom of the tree in order to obtain a powerful fruit. Where'd he go?
Here's a fun fact about the sword. The Yamato is designed to separate and split things with a demonic connection. So in this case, people like Vergil and Dante are any sort of opening to the underworld. The rebellion, on the other hand, is the opposite, being designed to combine and merge, which in this case, merge Dante, itself and the Sparda to create the Sin Devil Trigger.
Our heroes head down the tree and Dante gets to Urizen first. Urizen eats the fruit and becomes even more powerful and Dante has to fight him again. While he is fighting, V tells Nero about the ongoing fight between Dante and Vergil that has been going on since they were kids. Dante stabs Urizen, he falls to the ground and starts bleeding, and Nero and V catch up. V walks towards Urizen to finish the fight, but betrays our heroes and merges with them instead, bringing back Vergil in his full glory. Dante begins to fight him, but Vergil tells him to heal his wounds first, and then they'll fight, before opening a portal to reach the top of the Qlipoth.
The Qlipoth at this point has grown tremendously, reaching into the upper atmosphere and unleashing hordes of demons on the now ruined Redgrave city. But that's no issue for Dante as he just scales right to the top in supposedly a matter of minutes.
Dante's now ready to settle the score with Vergil and stop him for good, but Nero wants to tag along. Dante doesn't want him tagging along and reveals to Nero that Vergil is his father.
What is it then? He's your father!
What? Nero doesn't know how to take this, while Dante makes his way back up the tree to fight Vergil. On the way, he's met by the familiars that fought for V, and they want to destroy Dante before Vergil does. Dante defeats them and says his goodbyes to Griffin.
Rest in peace, little chicken. It's been a bash.
The final battle now commences, as the brothers conversate about how many times they have fought. The two reach a stalemate as their skills are too evenly matched. They enter their SDT forms and charge at one another, but there's something in between.
I guess that's all I needed to hear.
We cut back a few minutes to see Nero talking to Kyrie on the phone before shedding his metal arm and growing a normal one in its place, while unlocking his full Devil Trigger form and going to stop Dante and Vergil from fighting. He tells the two of them to put their differences aside, but Vergil doesn't want to back down and challenges Nero to a fight, which he loses, and the brothers agree to go to the underworld to sever the roots of the Qlipoth and seal the portal, trapping themselves but leaving Nero as the world's main protector.
Don't forget, Vergil left his son with a little gift, telling Nero,
I won't lose next time. Hold on to that until then.
maybe someday we'll get the ever-elusive DMC6.
The game ends with the brothers dueling playfully in the underworld before Dante utters that famous word.
Don't you dare say it, Jackpot!
This story is absolutely batshit insane, but an incredible ride from start to end. The reveal of Vergil was done spectacularly, and the story really tugged on my heartstrings at times, with Nero struggling with the revelation of who his family is and trying to not let that family fall apart. It's also a great story for Dante to finally confront a lot of his past, as well as how he tries to protect Nero. He's just trying to be a good uncle. The threat of Urizen is felt immensely from the beginning, since he defeats Lady, Trish, Nero and Dante with no effort. It makes him a truly scary foe to face. The one complaint I have about the story is that Lady and Trish are relegated to either fan service or background roles, and don't play a major part in the story.
The story of Devil May Cry 5 is up there with 3, as I feel it tells the best and most over-the-top plot that it can. It is a true love letter to what came before, and you can really see that with each moment, as the story never misses a beat and constantly keeps you hooked. It is an epic adventure from start to finish, with all your favourite characters. And sure, while some characters did have less screen time than others, at least they didn't downright neglect them. Overall, beautifully well done.
Having a great story and incredible combat is all well and good, but if the levels are awful, then all that doesn't mean a thing. Luckily for DMC5, the levels are incredible and have finally dropped the semi-open world from games 1 to 4 and gone with a strictly linear approach.
I feel this fits a lot better since the levels in previous games were still intended to be played in a linear order, so why not just ignore the open world aspect? It also wouldn't work for this game since it jumps around in time. A lot. My least favourite mission is probably Mission 12, as it's very formulaic and just has us repeating the same process over and over again, but even this wasn't the worst thing ever because of Dante's combat variety. There are a couple missions that let you decide what character you want to play as. First one's Mission 7, where you can choose between V and Nero to traverse the subway of Redgrave City. The second is Mission 13, where we choose between all three of our characters to make our way through the layers of the Clypath. These are pretty cool, allowing the player to choose their favourite character to play along through the level the way they prefer. You can also, in certain areas of these levels, see the other characters fighting enemies off in the distance, which is such a nice detail, and depending on what orders you play the characters in, that character will replicate what you did when you played that version of the level. Having good levels is one thing, but the one aspect you cannot get wrong are the boss fights. And these are some of the most consistently great boss fights in the whole series. Urizen is a constant threat, and we fight him 5 times across our adventure. Each time he has new moves to throw the player off as their skills evolve. We fight him twice as Nero, and 3 times as Dante. Goliath is pretty cool and acts as a first encounter. He is huge and thus has wide attacks which can be dodged.
Goliath is a great starter boss if you ask me. He's big and his attacks are well telegraphed and easy to read. You know what he is going to do and when he is going to do it. This is great preparation for some of the other bosses as they tend to vary it up and go a lot faster.
Artemis is a movement based boss and has a lot of lasers to dodge before you can lay the smackdown. Nidhogg is the first fight with V and I honestly think it's the weakest. Most of this might be down to V's gameplay or the fact that he barely attacks you since you can't move around much when using your familiars. The Elder Geryon Knight is our next boss, and he is a much better fight for V as it actually involves moving. This is a callback to Geryon from 3 and has the same gimmick of slowing down time. Gilgamesh is our next boss, and he's cool for the spectacle, but similar to Nidhogg, doesn't actually do much in terms of attacks. Next fight is Cavalier Angelo, and he is one of the best in the game. This is a proper one-on-one duel with a bigger opponent, plus he can teleport across the arena to hit you. He was the knight on Geryon earlier, but now without his horse, which makes him far more dangerous.
Cavalier is tricky in that he switches things up, as he himself is a melee-based opponent, being able to block and parry most of your attacks. Not only that, as Ross said, he can move, teleporting back and forth across the battlefield, which can easily throw you off and kill your flow if you're not careful. And he even has ranged projectiles. All this makes Cavalier a good, fun and challenging pain in the ass to fight.
Boss number I've lost count is Malphus, who was certainly a challenge, with her opening portals to attack you at range and using them to move quickly across the arena to get the jump on you. But with V supplying his Devil Breakers, we get the job done. King Cerberus was certainly a highlight, once again a callback to a boss from 3. He uses all 3 of his elemental states to change the arena we fight in and always switch up his attack patterns. He definitely kept me on my toes. Our penultimate fight was with the familiars carried by V. This is a nice callback to DMC1, with many of the attacks being quite familiar to those who remember those fights. We have to attack Griffin in shadow so that Nightmare appears, as he is the real health bar. And with all of those out of the way, we come to our final fight. Vergil. This man is not fucking around this time and pulls out all the stops, using every move at his disposal to deal with us as Dante, and then does the same thing a second time when we fight him as Nero. These fights are a perfect culmination of everything you have learned in the gameplay and the story arcs of all 3 of these characters. These are my favourite fights in the whole series, I think, and I don't know how they could ever be topped.
Vergil takes things to the next level in this game. He's fast, precise and requires good placement within the fight to stay on top of him, as he continuously gets in close and backs off for a mixed range of powerful melee attacks that stun and knock you back, such as his Rapid Slash, or ranged attacks that keep you at a distance, such as his Judgment Cuts. He is a boss that will keep you on your toes and requires a lot of practice if you want to be stylish and proficient at beating him, especially on higher difficulties.
But you must be thinking to yourself, Roscoe, do you fight through all these levels in silence? No, there is an absolutely sublime banger of a soundtrack. The main characters each have their own song, as well as certain bosses or moments having their own song as well. The soundtrack is available all over the place, and I've been using it to introduce the characters, so you can go take a listen for yourself. In terms of extra content, there is a good amount to do after you finish the story. You can replay all the levels with your upgrades and abilities, play on progressively harder difficulties if you want to test yourself, or make your way through a horde mode of sorts that we will talk about soon. But my favourite piece of extra content is the DLC for the base game, or included in the special edition. You can play through the entire story with the first son of Sparta, Vergil.
You shall die.
If you thought Vergil was a powerhouse before, then you clearly haven't touched him here. He's cool, calm, calculated, and most importantly, powerful. He's equipped with the same weapons as his previous appearances, those being the Yamato, Mirage Edge, and Beowulf, which is still fucking awesome. The Yamato has some extremely impressive abilities like Judgment Cut or Rapid Slash, or even Judgment Cut End, which is such an awesome move to use. He also uses summon swords instead of guns, which adds to the coolness factor, as he can just will swords into existence at any time. Like every character, he takes some getting used to, but I can't communicate how fucking awesome it feels to play as him. He also has the best song in the whole game, and I don't think anyone will argue with me on that point. Bury the Light is fucking awesome. Time to tackle Horde mode, also known as Bloody Palace. I've neglected to talk about it in previous games, but I thought I would cover it here. This is a round by round challenge mode where you face progressively harder enemies, as any of our main characters. I tried it out as Dante, and I clearly need some practice since I only made it to wave 10. This would be a nice challenge if I wanted to test myself.
The Bloody Palace is an absolutely fantastic place to practice adapting to different enemy types and group variations. With 100 floors, there is hours of fun to be had, honing your skills and really pushing yourself to become better at the game overall.
The final piece of extra content you have access to in DMC5 is the Void, which is an empty area that you can use to practice your moves against different enemies and see the input made by your controller. You can choose how enemies behave, and even see how much damage different moves do to see what are the most effective combos. It's a really cool feature, and I think more games should have a fuck around mode incorporated, especially fighters like this. The only negative thing I could say about it is that you can't spawn in boss enemies to practice against them, which is a shame since I would love to be able to practice the best way to combo boss enemies for subsequent playthroughs.
The Void is one of the best additions to DMC pretty much ever. I mean, what else is there to say?
That's all I have to say about Devil May Cry 5, the swan song to the whole series and what I believe to be one of the best games ever made. A fantastic story with some extremely engaging combat mechanics and a banger soundtrack to boot. And with this video coming to a close, I've covered every single Devil May Cry game, and what a journey it's been. I'm so glad I could bring all of you along with me as I discover the majesty of Dante, Nero, Vergil and the rest of the crew, and I look forward to what the future holds for these characters. Playing through this series has been one of my favourite experiences ever playing video games, even when the games in question weren't the greatest. It's helped me find a new genre of game that I enjoy and a series that I will hold dear to my heart for years to come. I want to thank you all for watching this video, and I'll see you next time. Jackpot!
I will admit, the reboot has a slightly nice art style.
Score for the reboot. I'm up 1.
Excuse me, 3's the best. Where did you learn to count? Where even?
You know, I get the feeling that this argument is never going to end.
Maybe. But we got plenty of time until DMC 6.
Look, okay. I thought Dante's design in the reboot was fine as an alternate take on the character.
No, he looked too much like an asshole.
For fuck's sake, is it because of the black hair?
Yes,
For fuck's sake. But he gets the white hair at the end.
that's only in a Devil Trigger.
No, it's at the end. He gets the white hair.